Welcome to our deep dive into enlightenment. Now, we're going to be exploring Steven Pinker's arguments for progress in the modern world.
Yeah.
And trust me, you might be surprised by what we uncover in his data.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up, in all the negativity that we see, on the news and things like that. But Pinker really takes a different approach.
Yeah.
He uses data
Right.
to kind of paint a different picture of the world and, challenge assumptions that we might have.
Yeah, and that's what I thought was so fascinating about this book, is he doesn't just say, oh, things are getting better. He backs it up with numbers.
Right.
It's not just like an anecdotal kind of thing.
Yeah.
And one of the first things that jumped out at me was his argument about the decline of violence.
Right.
We tend to think that the world is more dangerous now,
Mm-hmm.
but he says that the data actually tells a different story.
Exactly. And he argues that we're actually living in the most peaceful time in human history. And he points to, the decline in wars, homicides, and even violence against children.
I have to admit, I was a little skeptical at first when I heard that.
Sure.
But then when he started breaking it down and looking at the numbers, it was pretty compelling.
Yeah.
And he even talks about how our perception of violence is often shaped by, media coverage, which tends to focus on the negative.
Right. It's that availability heuristic we were talking about.
Okay.
Where we tend to overestimate the likelihood of events that are easily recalled, like a vivid image we see on the news.
So even though violence is statistically less common now, it feels more prevalent because it's constantly, in our faces on TV, on the internet.
Yeah, it's like we're looking through a warped lens, and Pinker's arguing that we need to kind of step back and look at the bigger picture.
Right. See the long-term trends.
Yeah, and the long-term trends that are often hidden by all the noise.
So what are some of those trends? What kind of progress are we talking about?
Well, one of the most striking examples is the decline in child mortality.
Yeah.
It's hard to fathom now, but just a few generations ago, it was common for families to lose multiple children.
Wow.
To diseases that are easily preventable today.
It's heartbreaking to think about.
Yeah.
But it also highlights how far we've come.
Right.
And Pinker credits a lot of this progress to the unsung heroes of science, the researchers and innovators whose discoveries have saved billions of lives.
Yeah, think about vaccines, antibiotics, even something as simple as oral rehydration therapy for children suffering from diarrhea.
Right.
These innovations might seem mundane to us now.
Yeah.
But they've had a truly transformative impact on human well-being.
I was blown away by the fact that Pinker estimates over 5 billion lives have been saved by the work of just 100 scientists.
Wow.
That's more than the entire population of the world a couple centuries ago.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Like you said, it's easy to focus on the problems, but when you look at the data, it's clear we've made incredible strides in alleviating human suffering.
And it's not just about living longer.
Right.
It's about living better.
Right.
Pinker talks about the Great Escape.
Yeah.
The escape from poverty experienced by developed countries over the past few centuries. And what's even more exciting is that this trend is spreading globally now.
It is, and we're seeing what Pinker calls the Great Convergence.
Okay.
Developing countries are rapidly catching up in terms of wealth, health, and overall well-being.
And this is where I think a personal story might help illustrate this point a little bit.
Sure.
My mother-in-law grew up in Singapore.
Okay.
And she remembers as a child having to split the single egg 4 ways with her siblings.
Wow.
That was dinner.
Wow.
Today, Singapore is one of the most prosperous countries in the world.
Right.
It's really a testament to that transformative power of progress.
It's incredible to think about those kinds of shifts.
Yeah.
And it really does challenge this narrative that the world is, inevitably doomed
Right, yeah.
to decline.
Of course, no conversation about progress is complete without addressing the issue of inequality.
Sure.
It's something that a lot of people worry about, and for good reason.
Right. Pinker acknowledges this concern, but he also makes an important distinction between inequality and poverty.
Okay.
He argues we need to be careful not to conflate the two.
Because it is possible for inequality to rise even as everyone's standard of living is improving.
Precisely. Think about it this way. If 1 billion people are lifted out of extreme poverty and they move into a lower middle class,
Right.
the gap between the richest and the poorest may widen, but everyone is objectively better off than before.
So while inequality is something we need to address, it's important to remember it's not always a sign of regress.
In fact, Pinker argues that reducing extreme poverty often leads to increased inequality initially. It's a complex issue. And focusing solely on income inequality can sometimes distract us from the bigger picture of improving well-being for the vast majority of people.
Okay, so we've talked about violence. We've talked about health.
Yep.
Wealth and inequality.
Right.
What about the environment?
Sure.
This is another area where people tend to be pretty pessimistic about the future.
It's understandable.
Yeah.
The environmental challenges we face are significant, but Pinker argues that even here, there are reasons for cautious optimism.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, for example, he points out that even as oil shipments have increased dramatically, the number of oil spills has plummeted.
That seems counterintuitive.
It does.
But the data backs it up.
But the data backs it up, yeah.
So technology and regulations have made oil transport far safer.
Much safer, yeah.
It's an example of how progress can often address the very problems that it creates.
Right.
And this isn't limited to oil spills.
No, it's not.
We've also seen improvements in air quality, deforestation rates, and access to clean water in many parts of the world.
Yeah, in many parts of the world.
That's really interesting. So it's not just about reducing the negative impacts.
Right.
It's also about making positive changes.
Yeah, exactly. Pinker argues that we have a tendency to focus on the problems, but we overlook the solutions that are already being implemented and the progress that's already been made.
Speaking of solutions,
yeah,
Pinker makes a rather controversial argument for nuclear power.
He does.
As a safe and scalable solution to climate change.
Right, and he challenges these common fears surrounding nuclear energy.
Okay.
Pointing out that it has a far safer track record than fossil fuels, especially when you look at deaths per kilowatt hour.
I was really surprised by that statistic.
Yeah.
Nuclear power is actually much safer than coal, oil, biomass, and even natural gas.
That's what the data suggests, yeah.
So our fear of nuclear energy might be out of proportion to the actual risk.
It seems that way.
Especially when compared to the dangers posed by, our reliance on fossil fuels.
Right. And that brings us to another crucial aspect of Pinker's argument, the importance of reason and humanism.
Right.
Yeah.
He spends a good chunk of the book defending these Enlightenment values against what he sees as modern critiques.
Right. And so he challenges the claims that science is inherently racist or sexist.
Okay.
Arguing that it was actually the humanities that historically perpetuated those prejudices.
Interesting.
Science, on the other hand, provides a framework for understanding the world based on evidence and reason, regardless of your background or your beliefs.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
It's not about saying that science is perfect.
Right.
But it's about recognizing its potential to overcome prejudice and promote a more equitable world.
And that's ultimately what Pinker's book is all about, making the case for reason, science, and humanism as the driving forces behind progress.
So if we want to continue making progress, we need to defend those values.
Yeah.
And apply them to the challenges we face.
Exactly. It's not about being blindly optimistic, but about recognizing that we have the tools to solve problems and create a better future.
So it's a call to action.
It is.
A reminder that progress is not inevitable.
Right.
It requires effort, vigilance, and a commitment to the values that have brought us this far.
And that's where things get really interesting, because Pinker doesn't just look at the past. Right. He also explores the potential for future progress.
Oh.
And that's what we'll be diving into in the next part of our deep dive.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
All right, so stay tuned. We'll be right back after a quick break.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we're back and ready to dive into some of the more futuristic aspects of Pinker's book. It's pretty mind-blowing to think about the possibilities for progress if we continue down this path of reason, science, and humanism. Where does he see things heading?
Well, one of the areas that Pinker is particularly excited about is the potential of artificial intelligence.
AI.
Yeah.
Yes, it seems like everyone's talking about AI these days, but it's also one of those things that can feel a bit, scary.
Definitely. There are valid concerns about the potential downsides of AI, but Pinker urges us not to let fear overshadow the incredible opportunities that it presents.
So how does he see AI contributing to progress?
Well, he points to a wide range of potential applications, from personalized medicine and education to solving complex scientific problems and even tackling climate change.
Personalized medicine sounds pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Imagine having treatments tailored specifically to your genetic makeup.
Exactly. And Pinker believes that AI could play a key role in making this a reality. He also sees AI as having the potential to revolutionize education by creating personalized learning experiences that cater to individual needs and learning styles.
That would be a game changer, especially for people who struggle with traditional educational models.
And then there's the potential for AI to accelerate scientific discovery. Imagine AI algorithms sifting through vast amounts of data to identify patterns and insights that would take humans years to uncover.
It sounds like AI could supercharge our ability to solve some of the world's most pressing problems.
That's Pinker's hope. He argues that if we approach AI with a sense of cautious optimism, it could become one of the most powerful tools we have for creating a better future.
Okay, so AI sounds promising, but what about some of the other potential breakthroughs?
Another area where Pinker sees huge potential is biotechnology.
Biotechnology, like gene editing and things like that. It definitely feels like we're on the verge of some major breakthroughs in this field.
Pinker believes that biotechnology could revolutionize healthcare by allowing us to cure diseases that are currently incurable and potentially even extend human lifespan.
That sounds incredible, but it also raises some ethical questions. I mean, how far should we go with gene editing? Where do we draw the line?
Pinker acknowledges these concerns, and he emphasizes the importance of careful ethical consideration as we develop and implement these technologies. He's not advocating for a Wild West approach to biotechnology.
So it's about finding the right balance between innovation and responsibility.
Exactly, and that applies to all areas of technological advancement. We need to be mindful of the potential risks, but we shouldn't let fear hold us back from exploring the incredible possibilities for progress.
It seems like a lot of Pinker's optimism comes from this belief in human ingenuity. He seems to think that if we set our minds to it, we can overcome any challenge.
That's definitely a key theme throughout the book. Pinker argues that we have a tendency to underestimate our own capacity for problem solving. He points to countless examples throughout history where humans have overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges.
Like eradicating smallpox or landing a man on the moon.
Exactly.
Ugh.
Those were once considered impossible feats. But through human ingenuity, determination, and collaboration, we achieved them.
So his message seems to be, don't underestimate the power of human potential.
Right, and it's not just about technological advancements. Pinker also sees progress happening on a social and cultural level.
What do you mean by that?
Well, he points to things like the expansion of human rights, the decline of authoritarianism, and the growing acceptance of diversity and inclusion as signs that we're moving towards a more just and equitable world.
He sees these social and cultural shifts as being just as important as technological advancements. It's about progress on multiple fronts.
Exactly. Pinker argues that these advancements are all interconnected. They reinforce each other and create a positive feedback loop that drives progress forward.
Okay, so this all sounds very promising. But you mentioned earlier that Pinker also talks about the forces of unreason. What are those, and how do they threaten progress?
Pinker identifies several forces that he believes pose a threat to the Enlightenment project. These include things like tribalism, authoritarianism, religious fundamentalism, and even romanticism about the past.
It seems like those are all forces that pull us away from reason, science, and humanism.
Exactly. Pinker argues that these forces have always been with us, but they've gained new momentum in recent years, fueled by social media, political polarization, and economic anxieties.
So how do we combat these forces? How do we ensure that progress continues?
Pinker argues that the best defense against unreason is to actively promote the values of the Enlightenment, reason, science, humanism, and a commitment to progress.
It's not enough to just hope for the best. We have to actively work to create a better future.
Precisely. And that means engaging in constructive dialogue, promoting critical thinking, supporting education, and advocating for policies that align with these values.
It's about making sure that reason and humanism continue to guide our decision-making, both individually and collectively.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that progress is not a spectator sport. It requires active participation from all of us.
So it's not just about celebrating the progress we've made, it's about using that progress as a foundation for building an even better future.
And that's something that each of us can contribute to in our own way.
So if someone is listening to this and feeling inspired by Pinker's message of progress, where should they start? What can they do to make a difference?
That's a great question. I think the most important thing is to start with yourself. Educate yourself. Engage in critical thinking. Be open to new ideas and challenge your own assumptions.
It's about being a lifelong learner, constantly seeking new knowledge and perspectives.
And then think about how you can use your knowledge and skills to make a positive impact in your community, your workplace, or even just in your daily interactions with others.
It can be as simple as having a thoughtful conversation with someone who holds a different viewpoint, or volunteering your time to a cause you believe in.
Exactly. Every small action can contribute to the larger project of progress.
So it's about being an active participant in shaping the future we want to see.
And that's a powerful message. It means that we're not just passengers on the train of progress, we're the engineers.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It's empowering to think that we have a hand in shaping our collective destiny.
And that brings us to the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore Pinker's vision for the future and what it means for all of us.
Right, so we've explored the progress of the past and the forces that could, help or hinder us in the future. And now I'm really curious to hear what Pinker actually envisions for the future. Does he have a crystal ball, or at least a really good data model?
Well, he doesn't claim to have a crystal ball, but he does extrapolate from current trends and the trajectory of human ingenuity. And what he sees is a future that could be even brighter than the present if we continue to embrace, reason, science, and humanism.
That's exciting to think about, but also a bit daunting. I mean, how do you even begin to imagine what the world might look like in 50 or 100 years?
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. But Pinker argues that we can glimpse the future by looking at the emerging trends and innovations that are already shaping our world.
Like the things we were just talking about, AI biotechnology, and those cultural shifts towards, greater equality and inclusion.
Exactly. Pinker believes these are just the tip of the iceberg. He envisions a future where technology continues to advance at an exponential pace, leading to breakthroughs in areas like energy transportation and even space exploration.
Space exploration. Now that's something I can get excited about. Imagine humans colonizing Mars or traveling to distant star systems.
It sounds like science fiction, but Pinker believes it could become a reality within our lifetimes. He sees space exploration as not just a scientific endeavor, but also a cultural one, pushing the boundaries of human knowledge and expanding our understanding of our place in the universe.
It's mind-boggling to think about the possibilities. But let's bring it back down to Earth for a moment. What about the challenges we face here and now? Climate change, poverty, political instability, all those things that make it hard to be optimistic about the future.
Well, Pinker doesn't shy away from those challenges. In fact, he argues that recognizing and addressing them is crucial to ensuring that progress continues. He believes that we have the tools and knowledge to solve these problems if we can muster the collective will and resources.
So it's not about pretending that everything is perfect. It's about acknowledging the problems while also believing in our ability to solve them.
Precisely. And that's where the values of the Enlightenment come in. Reason, science, and humanism provide a framework for understanding complex problems, developing evidence-based solutions, and working together to implement them.
It's about taking a rational problem-solving approach rather than getting bogged down in despair or resorting to simplistic solutions.
Exactly. And Pinker is optimistic that if we stay true to these values, we can create a future where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
So it's not just about technological advancements. It's about creating a more just equitable and sustainable world for all.
That's right. Pinker's vision for the future is not just about material prosperity, but also about human flourishing in all its dimensions.
I like that. It's a future worth striving for.
And it's a future that's within our reach if we choose to make it so.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive into Pinker's ideas. It's given me a lot to think about. And I have to say, I'm feeling a bit more optimistic about the future now.
I'm glad to hear that. I think that's one of the most valuable things about exploring these ideas. It can help us shift our perspective and see the world in a new light.
It's easy to get caught up in the negativity, but Pinker reminds us that there's also a lot of good happening in the world, and that we have the power to make things even better.
That's a powerful message to carry with us as we navigate the complexities of the 21st century.
Well, thank you for joining me on this deep dive into Enlightenment Now. It's been an enlightening conversation.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, if you're intrigued by what you've heard today, I highly encourage you to check out Enlightenment Now for yourself. It's a challenging read, but it's full of thought-provoking insights that could change the way you view the world. And maybe, just maybe, it'll leave you feeling a little bit more optimistic about the future, too.